Hello everyone, welcome to this year's version of Camp Wild. Today in this video we're going to be talking about furs and skulls of some of the animals that we can find here in Georgia. We always like to start by talking about the difference between carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. And when we look at the skulls, you'll be able to notice the differences, so when you're on a hike or out with your family, you'll be able to tell what the animal is by certain characteristics. Today we'll start with herbivores, which are animals that only eat plants. This one right here is probably pretty easy for most of y'all to guess. We have quite a few of these here in Fayette County, and you can find them throughout the eastern and central United States, actually throughout the United States. This is a male white-tailed deer, as you can probably tell by the antlers. So there is a difference, we have this question a lot, between antlers and horns. Antlers fall off every year, horns don't. So horns continue to grow. But a white-tailed deer has antlers and they fall out. So as we look over the skull, if we look at its teeth, you'll notice the back teeth are relatively flat and there's no teeth in the front. So one cool thing the white-tailed deer, when they eat, is they actually use their tongues and things, and they use this to pull grass and then mash it up with their back molars. And a lot of herbivores will have this type of setup. So deer, and if you've ever been around goats and cattle and things like that, will have teeth like this. Also, if we look at their eyes, you notice they have pretty good sized eye sockets and they're on the side of their head. This allows them really good peripheral vision, which means they can see to the sides and behind them much better than we can or other carnivorous animals. Peripheral vision helps them to elude predators and get away. The problem with that is it does create certain blind spots in the front and the back of them. But yeah, so we'll move on. This right here is a doe white-tailed deer, which is the female white-tailed deer. You'll notice the teeth are the same. It doesn't have any teeth here in the front. It's got great big eyes on the side. So, alright. Then we will move on to North America's largest rodent, and we do have quite a few of these here in Fayette County. This wonderful skull belongs to the American beaver. As you can see, it's got eyes on the top of its head, which allows it to swim and still see, and its nose is on the top of its skull. So that allows, a lot of times if you see beavers in a wetland, they're cruising along like this, and it allows them to see and breathe without having their whole body exposed. Also, if we look at this, you'll see their teeth are coated with kind of this orange covering. That allows beaver to chew, and other rodents to chew through stuff that we can never chew through. It's a protective coating. Beavers and other rodents also have free-rooted teeth, which means their teeth continually grow throughout their lifetime. Once we get our adult teeth, that's all we have. They don't keep growing. Beavers, rats, squirrels, mice, chipmunks, other rodents have teeth that continually grow. And that's why rodents they need to chew on stuff, because if they don't, their teeth can possibly get too long and kind of grow like this, which prevents them from eating and isn't a good thing. We all like to eat. Another rodent that I'm sure almost everyone has seen here in our area is this little guy. So if we look, we see that it's got the orange protective coating on its teeth, which means it's a rodent. It's got great big eyes on the side, so it primarily eats nuts and seeds and things like that. This little fella right here is a gray squirrel. So we have a bunch here in Fayette County. They're arboreal, which means they live in the trees, and my guess is you can probably see one in your yard. Alright, move on to this skull. So when we move on to this skull, we notice it doesn't have the protective coating, but it has teeth similar to a rodent. It's got great big eyes on the side. Its skull shape is a little different. If you look at its bottom jaw, it's a little different than a squirrel or a beaver. And we do have these here in Fayette County. This is an eastern cottontail rabbit. It's a herbivore, eats vegetation, likes brushy areas that butt up to open areas. They're squirrels and rabbits both are a food source for a variety of animals. But this is actually not a rodent. This is a lagomorph, and we can tell because it doesn't have the protective coating, and it has 4 incisors instead of 2 big ones. So if we look at the squirrel skull, there's 2 great big incisors, and if we look at the rabbit skull, there's actually 4 on that one. So if you ever find these laying in the woods, that's how you can tell the difference between a squirrel and a rabbit skull. Now we will move on to animals that only eat meat, which are called carnivores. They have adaptations to catching and killing prey or to scavenging. This is the largest carnivore that we actually have here in Georgia. This is a black bear. So if we look at the black bear skull, and it's a carnivore, but it does eat a lot of berries and fruits and things like that also. But if we look at a bear's teeth, we notice it's got these great big canine teeth, and then it's got its molars and other teeth are sharper, and they go all the way back. Also, if we look at a bear skull or any other carnivore skull, the eyes are on the front of the head, and that allows for better binocular vision. So where a deer can't necessarily gauge how close a predator is, it just knows it's there, a bear or other carnivores can gauge how far away the animal is. So yeah, that is the black bear. If we move down the road here, we notice our skulls are going to get a little smaller, but all these animals can be found here in Fayette County, or at least the bear's not in Fayette County, but they can be found throughout Georgia. This right here, if we look, it's got big canine teeth, it's got sharp teeth from front to back, it's got a little longer snout and muzzle, its eyes are in the front, so we know it's a carnivore. This one differs from this skull a little bit in shape, and this is how you're going to tell by the teeth. This right here is a red fox. So we have these, they're quite crafty little critters, and they're in our area, but you don't see them very often. They do a wonderful job helping us control rabbit and squirrel populations and other rats, mice, rodents that we don't necessarily want around. If we look at this one, we notice it's got great big eyes that point forward. It's got really sharp teeth, but it doesn't have quite as long of a muzzle, and it's just got super sharp teeth all the way from front to back. This is a bobcat skull, which we do have quite a few of these in Fayette County. They're really neat, sneaky animals that can live in a variety of habitats. And we know it's a carnivore. It's got big eyes in the front and the sharp teeth. Yeah. And if we also look at any of our animals' skulls, they're going to have this bone right here. This is called the sagittal crest. And that is what muscles and things connect to control the bite force of the animal. So the bigger the sagittal crest, the stronger the bite's going to be on the animal. So if we move down to this animal, this is one of my favorite animals that we have. It's North America's only marsupial. It's got more teeth than any animal in North America. It eats a ton of ticks, and they're pretty neat. This is a Virginia opossum. Some other cool facts, besides they eat a bunch of ticks, they're our only marsupial, they have the most teeth, they also have a really low body temperature and most of the time can't contact rabies, which is kind of a neat fact about opossums. You'll probably see one of these in the nighttime or right when the sun sets, and they seem pretty scary, but they're usually just bluffing. And what they'll do is they'll open their mouth real wide like this and hiss at you. But more than likely, they just want you to leave them alone and go away. And they'll go on their way eating insects and ticks and all other kinds of things. All right. So this animal right here, if we look at this skull and we look at this skull, there's quite a few similarities between the teeth and the eyes, the sagittal crest. The difference is the size. And this animal right here is the raccoon. So if we look at its teeth, it's got really sharp front ones, and they're sharp all the way. When you find a raccoon skull in the wild, you can tell the difference because the raccoon skull its back molars will kind of be flat like ours. So if you take your tongue and feel your back teeth, that's real similar to what a raccoon's back teeth would feel like. Now we're going to move on to our next group of animals, which are omnivores. Omnivores are animals that eat both plants and animals. So we're omnivores, and this fellow right here is an omnivore. They can be found throughout Georgia, but this is not a native animal. This is an exotic invasive animal that is super smart and is really good at making a living here in Georgia. And this is actually a wild pig. So if we look at a lot of omnivore skulls, they're going to have both sharp and flat teeth, and a lot of times their eyes are going to be more pointed towards the front than the sides. But yeah, so this is an incredibly invasive animal that we have quite a few of, but it does have some really neat adaptations to survive. All right, let's talk about some furs real quick. This little one right here is the softest fur that we have in the bunch. It is one of our native rodents. It is an aquatic species, which means it lives in the water. And this is a pretty good size. They get a little bigger. You might see them a little smaller than this. But this is a muskrat. So you'll see these floating around in different water sources here in Fayette County. And if I had a skull for a muskrat, it looks real similar to a beaver. It's just much smaller. But some cool things about their fur is you can see it's kind of shiny. And they have oil glands that they produce kind of a covering, a waterproof covering that they use on their fur. And also, this might be kind of tough to see on camera. But if we look at the fur, and you see these long hairs right here, these are guard hairs, which grow much longer than the undercoat here, which is kind of the insulating coat. So the undercoat of most animals is going to be much thicker, and then it's going to be covered with guard hairs. This is a member of the weasel family that we have in Fayette County, but it also likes to live near water. You can see its body's much longer, but it's a very efficient hunter. But you can also see it's kind of got a sheen to its fur. It also has the same longer guard hairs and thicker undercoat that insulates it and keeps it dry. But this is a mink. So they're not quite as common as some other animals here in Fayette County, but we are within their range, so at some point in time you might be lucky enough to find them. Now this one. And I bet most of y'all can guess what this one is, because if you look, it's got this ringed tail. This is a nocturnal animal, which means it comes out in the nighttime. It also has guard hairs and a really thick undercoat, like the other furs that I've shown you. But this is the raccoon. So they are quite crafty animals that we have in our area, but they have a super soft, well-insulated coat that allows them to survive in all different sorts of temperatures. And yeah. Now, if we look at this fur, it's got really long guard hairs, and they're kind of white. Mm-hmm. And then it's got a thick undercoat. This is also another nocturnal animal that I showed you the skull of, but this is the Virginia opossum. And so you might see them out at the same time as a raccoon, but they look pretty different, and raccoons are generally bigger. Opossums also, you can see there's no tail on this fur. Opossums kind of have a rat tail. It's just a long, hairless tail. But opossums really are great animals to have around, even though they're not the cutest, but they really are beneficial to our environment. This fur right here is to an animal you would probably see if you looked out your window. This is the gray squirrel. We have quite a few of them around here. It also has guard hairs, but it's much, much harder to see them. And it's got this thick, close, dense undercoat. And then this fur right here is to the cottontail, the eastern cottontail rabbit. It's really soft. You can see it's got the guard hairs too. The guard hairs on both the squirrel and the rabbit aren't near as long as like the muskrat and the raccoon, but they're still there. And this helps the animals to survive in the winter and the summer. Most animals are going to grow a winter coat that's much thicker than their summer coat. Here, where it's relatively temperate in Georgia, the furs, their fur might not be quite as thick. So, well, I hope this helps you identify some animals that we have throughout here in Georgia and Fayette County, and have fun on your next hike.